Rejoice, everyone. We're back with another Sekhie Reacts to Fate. This week, Mary Anning.
Our local paleontologist. That thing that I had a dude at a party ask me a couple weeks ago when I told him I do archaeology. Oh, so dinosaurs and stuff. And that did make me hurt a little bit inside, because when I said no, he then proceeded to start yes, no, hot, cold to try to figure out what archaeology was, because he didn't know. It didn't necessarily get better before it got worse, considering we started at dinosaurs.
It's all dirt monkeys in the end.
No, in fact, paleontology does not have to do with monkeys at all. That's human stuff. That's me.
No, you're not finding dirt monkeys. You are the dirt monkey.
Excuse me. The correct derogatory term is shovel bum? How dare you? Get your insulting terminology correct next time. Mary Anning's such a fun one because it's like so many people make the joke, right? Like archaeology, paleontology, same thing, you know? And it's like it's not the same thing at all. And so it's like I did not study dinosaurs per se, right? Like obviously I did have to study like human paleontology, right? But that's not dinosaurs.
But I'm sure you need to know the paperwork to do when you suddenly find a dinosaur bone, and they need to know the paperwork to do when they suddenly find a human bone.
You know, the irony is one of the jokes that people make about paleontology versus archaeology is that because archaeology is concerned with like culture layers and like eras, right? And you can see that a lot through the horizons of your dig site, right? So archaeology is very concerned right today with paperwork, right? Like perfect clean walls, clean lines, the paperwork to define the space you're digging in so that everything can be like appropriately located, labeled, and associated with a historical context or period that's associated with the layer you're in. Not the case with paleontology. The joke is that paleontologists just get to follow the bones, but an archaeologist, if you find a bone that's half in the wall, half out of the wall, you don't get to take that out. You have to fill out 50,000 forms with the government, and then maybe you'll be allowed in 10 years to take it out.
See, but you have to do the paperwork because as archaeologists, you always do paperwork. So you find something out of the ordinary, paperwork. Paleontologists do the paperwork when they find the human bone, not because they want to do the paperwork, but because you make them do the paperwork.
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Yeah, no. And if it's a recent bone, you should be doing paperwork regardless. And that paperwork probably has to do with criminal history. But yeah, because paleontologists just get to follow the bones, which is kind of a joke because they don't. I mean, you're still subject to like the areas that you're allowed to dig in and stuff like that. But because you're kind of digging in areas where you're finding paleontological remains, it's not often in the same areas that you're finding civilization or like cultural remains, so you don't have to be as concerned about preserving sort of like the horizons.
I don't know, if you find a perfectly preserved Australopithecus riding a perfectly preserved T-Rex, you probably need to report that to someone.
Yes, but it's less determinable by just the dirt around you exactly what period you're in without heavy scientific testing, so that like there's a level of like you get to be a little bit more follow the bone than you do in archaeology sometimes. Whereas in archaeology, if that bone is outside of your legally allowed dig square, you might, depending on the site you're on and the government and like the regulations, you might just have to leave it there and hope it's still there when you eventually get permission. Some places will allow you to kind of like extend an extra like bit to try to figure out what it is, but it's not always the case. But the biggest difference really is that you're just digging in completely different contexts, essentially, with largely different goals.
I don't know, one day maybe we'll perfect DNA cloning and suddenly we'll have intelligent triceratops demanding reclamation on triceratop bones.
You know, I showed you that TikTok video the other day. It was just like, you know, the reason why they can keep making Jurassic Park and Jurassic World movies is because if there was a park full of cloned dinosaurs, I would still go. Even if a dinosaur got out and killed a bunch of people and then they had to put the tickets on sale to make people come because they're cheaper, I would still go. Because, like, yeah, it's gonna go wrong, but what are the chances of it going wrong on the day that I'm there, as opposed to the day when anyone else is there?
Just avoid any grand openings, previews.
Exactly. New exhibit introductions.
Watch the money before you go. Make sure that the money's not flowing in at disproportionate amounts.
Exactly. That's why you can just keep making Jurassic Park movies, because as humans, we would go. Like, are you telling me you wouldn't go to a Jurassic Park?
Look, if the rich, like, if the rich, like, 1% aren't on site, there's no people to kill to make a point in the movie.
Yeah. And also, I did see a funny comment on that same video that was like, and just imagine, if it was really popular, you'd have one in, like, California and one in, like, Florida, and then purists would get mad if you called Jurassic World Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park Jurassic World.
Isn't that the most unrealistic thing about Jurassic World, the movie and the franchise, that there was only one of them?
Well, no, because I think, if I remember the premise of the movie correctly, Jurassic Park, the park had never opened, right? Not publicly.
We're talking park.
But in Jurassic World, the park had been open for 10 years with a perfect safety record, is the premise of the movie starting, right? Which is, you know, why they're always like, oh my god, but we have such a great safety rating. Because apparently the park has been open for a decade with no major incidents, right? As opposed to in the Jurassic Park movie, where the park had not opened to the public. It was still in the initial stages, like before the public opening, per se. Not that long before, but still before the main opening.
I'm just saying, like, obviously we know Jurassic World exists. Why did Jurassic World Hong Kong not exist?
That's what I'm saying! So Messenger's open on my computer. But I don't know what tab it's open in. So if I get any Messenger messages, we're just going to hear the ding.
Close your tabs!
No! What if I can't reopen them again after I close them?
That's not how tabs work. Actually,
It does sometimes. Sometimes when my computer shuts down, it doesn't let me reopen my tabs.
You can reload the site.
No, sometimes I open Google back up and it does not have my tabs from before the computer shut down.
So just find the site again.
No, because sometimes those tabs have been open for 6 months and I would have to go back through my history 6 months. And the amount of things that I open and click through on a day-to-day basis means that that is literally impossible if I do not remember it in my head.
If you haven't been on that tab in the last 6 months...
But what if I need it?
What are the chances you'll need that tab in the next 6 months?
You don't know. Leave my system alone.
We'll call it a system. I'll let you have that.
Yeah. So we've gone a little bit far from Marianne. So I think we should maybe get back to Marianne. Once again, I don't remember who we did last. I only remember who I uploaded today, and that's why I say once again we have a very recent historical figure, right? Just gonna let you crunch that information.
No. I know who you uploaded today.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who we did last.
Yes, that's the problem. I don't remember. Oh, I remember who we did last.
Was it recent?
Georgios. Absolutely not. So I am both correct and incorrect. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the video that I uploaded today, which was a recent historical servant, not the last servant we did. When I say once again, we're doing a recent historical servant. I feel like I could have just cut that section out of the video. Instead, I decided to explain it. It's fine. So Mary Anning was born in 1799 and died in 1847. She was actually not that old. She wasn't even 50 when she died. That's so sad. Think of what she could have done in the world if she had been alive for longer. That would have been absolutely amazing. So Mary Anning is largely known and sort of lodged in the annals of history for her work in paleontology, early paleontology, fossil collection, and geologic studies as well to a certain extent. She lived primarily in England, and she worked primarily in England and most of Western Europe, finding dinosaur fossils, primarily from, I believe, the Jurassic period? Yeah. I think primarily the Jurassic period. I'm probably going to correct myself in my notes in a little bit, but I
These
think
are
it's...
important distinctions. You're closer to finding a T-Rex than a T-Rex is to finding a Stegosaurus.
I know. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head because it's further down in my notes, and I don't want to scroll down. And then, yeah, it was Jurassic. Yay, Jurassic Park! Topical conversation, except Jurassic Park was mostly filled with creatures from the Cretaceous period. So it really should have been called Cretaceous Park. And also, a lot of the dinosaurs that were in Jurassic Park did not actually exist together in the same era at the same time.
Okay, but that's fair. That's literally DNA cloning.
Yeah. And, well, it's also not as if normal zoos today house only animals that exist in the same climate.
This isn't like if you were to watch, I don't know, you remember that TV show Prehistoric Park where they go back
yes!
to the time period? And
oh my god, wait.
To see each other?
Wait. Prehistoric Park with Nigel Marven. This is one of like the kids' books that was based on. Oh my god! So the amount of times that I have mentioned this series to someone and they have not known what it is.
See,
oh my god!
You've mentioned it. You've shown me that book before, so that's why I remember the name off the top of my head. But I watched that when I was a kid. I was a big dinosaur kid.
Yeah, because I watched it when I was a kid too. Oh my god! Prehistoric Park was where it was at.
For me, it was dinosaurs in trains, which is why Dinosaur Train was my favorite children's book.
That's okay. I also really liked dinosaurs. I really liked dinosaurs. The Magic Tree House, they had the dinosaurs at daybreak, right? And I had the research guide that went along with it all about dinosaurs. I was a dinosaur child too. It was just a hop, skip, and a jump away from other, long dead things that you dug out of the earth, so... Oh my god. Anyways, so Mary Anning came from Dorset, England. Her father was a cabinet maker, and he supplied his income sort of by mining the fossil beds near town and selling them to tourists. So even in the 1700s, people were picking shit up out of the beaches and selling it to tourists. An age-old practice that you still find in many places today. Because one of the things, I don't know if this is the case in Europe as well, but in the US, you can often go into old bookstores and crystal stores will have just fossils for sale, right? That have just been pulled out of riverbeds and stuff, and sold to the crystal and rock stores. And then they'll sell them on. I was at an antique bookstore a year ago with one of my friends. They have fucking fossil stone this big on sale for $150. It was pretty fucking cool. And these things are not hard to find. Most people just walking around have probably touched one, picked one up, kicked one. Yeah. So Mary was the first of 10 children, born to her parents. But unfortunately, this Mary, right? Mary, the first child born to her parents, died. They actually renamed one of their later daughters after their dead daughter, Mary. Because a lot of their children died. As was the case with large families, often a lot of kids died. Not always, but a lot of kids died.
I wonder if the name Mary had a significance to them that they were specifically aiming for.
Possibly. It might have also just been a remembrance sort of thing. So our Mary Anning was born 5 months after her older sister died, and it's said that she was named after her sister. Okay. So only she and her older brother Joseph made it to adulthood out of the 10 kids that her parents had, which is unfortunate, but at the time, the child death rate was quite high, right? Partially because of things like smallpox and measles, which did not have treatments yet. Let's see. So when she was only about a year and a half old, she became a part of local legend, right? At a year and a half old. So one of their neighbors was holding her, and she was standing with a couple other women under a tree watching a horse show that was put on by like a traveling company. But lightning struck the tree, killing all of the adult women below, including like the woman who was holding Mary. And then she was rushed home and revived in a hot water bath and survived.
Miracle child right there.
No, actually, they called her a miracle child. Yeah. They said that before she was struck by lightning, had been sickly, but after she was struck by lightning, she miraculously recovered and was never sick anymore, practically. And then, because she was sort of literally a part of local legend in her hometown, we actually have a lot of records of people from her hometown talking about how, even as a child, she was incredibly intelligent and lively and curious about all sorts of things.
Let me tell you, you can make a religion out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and then growing up, obviously, we have all these attestations that she was a very curious and intelligent child. And I think that sort of it becomes quite easy to see how she blossomed into the woman that she was, right? Because even though she didn't have a ton of access to education, for example, like she had to learn to read and write through a Sunday school with her Congregationalist church. But at the time, because she was part of the Congregationalist church and not the Church of England, they actually did focus more on education, especially for the poor. And so she actually had copies of review magazines and stuff with academic essays in them. And one of the review books, I turned it off already. And one of the review books she had was called the Theological Magazine and Review of Dissenters, or Dissenters Theological Magazine and Review, in which the reason why her congregation had it was because her pastor, right, the reverend, of her family's church, had published essays in it about how God had created the world in 6 days. But remember the name of it. It's the Dissenters Theological Magazine and Review. Inside it were also essays by other people who propped up the idea of studying geology and not believing that God had created the world in 6 days, right? So even as a child and a young woman, she was being introduced to ideas that were very much outside of sort of religious church doctrine, right? So she was being exposed to things like the idea that the developing science of geology could tell us about the creation of the world in a way that was not tied to God. Which is pretty fucking progressive and cool for the time period, especially for a girl growing up, Now, remember how we said that her dad sold seaside fossils for a little bit of extra money? Well, moving into by the end of the 18th century, right? The area where she came from, Lyme Regis, had become really popular as a seaside resort town, right? Like a vacation town. And this was after the French Revolutionary Wars, because travel to mainland Europe was dangerous because of the Revolutionary Wars. So a lot of wealthy and middle-class people started going to Lyme Regis, right, for their vacations and their holidays. So locals often supplemented by selling curios and stuff, often fossils with that they named, right? So they sold snake stones and devil's fingers and vertebraries, right? And this really we know today as ammonites, belemnites, and vertebrae, right? Like actual fossilized things. And they would sell these snake stones and devil fingers and talk about their medicinal and mystical properties. Fossil collection was super popular as a pastime for rich and wealthy people in these periods, as it was developing into a science gradually, right? So the study of geology and biology was really just starting to get off the ground when it came to fossils and such.
Sound like people talking about crystals today.
I mean, yeah, basically that's what they were being treated as. So obviously this area that she was from, Lyme Regis, was really chock full of them. So it's a part of a geological formation called the Blue Lias, which contained layers of limestone and shale laid down sedimentarily on shallow seabed during the Jurassic period in alternating layers. So it's one of the most rich locations for fossil gathering in all of Britain. They're really unstable, but in winter, rain would weaken and cause landslides, and those landslides would expose new fossils. So there was always sort of like a fresh supply in the winters, even though it was a little dangerous. You could get a lot of fossils and then sell them to middle and upper class tourists who were coming to the seaside. So she and her brother often went on these expeditions with her father to supplement the income. And I mean, England was poor at the time. You know, the French Revolutionary Wars and the Napoleonic Wars caused shortages in food being delivered from mainland Europe to England. So, but at the same time, wages for the working class didn't change, even though food was getting more and more expensive. I mean, her father even was involved in organizing food shortage protests. And then her family also faced a certain level of discrimination because they were not part of the Church of England. Sort of in this period in history, those who were not part of the Church of England weren't allowed to study at places like Oxford or Cambridge. They weren't allowed to have certain positions in the army. They were excluded from a lot of different professions by law. So, you know, he's a cabinet maker and he sells fossils on the side because there's not a whole wealth of options for him because he's not Church of England. Her father had tuberculosis, and at one point he'd fallen on one of these cliffside gathering things, and he died in 1810. I mean, she was 11 years old? Yeah, 11 years old when he died, and he left the family in debt. They had to apply for aid for the poor because of the debt and lack of savings that he'd left. And selling curiosities and fossils at a little shop at the local inn really helped them, right? They continued to do that. Just a year later, after her father died, her family's first big find, right, was uncovered, right? And her brother dug up a ichthyosaur skull that was 4 feet long, and a few months later, Mary found the rest of the skeleton. So they had a complete ichthyosaur skeleton. The lord of the manor in Colway, which was near Lyme Regis, paid the family £23 for it, which at the time was a massive amount of money. So he paid them £23. He sold it to a collector who displayed it in London, and eventually it was sold for £45 and 5 shillings at auction to the British Museum, who had already picked out the name Ichthyosaurus for the specimen, which had previously been called crocodile in a fossil state. I don't know if you've seen an ichthyosaur. I feel just so that we all know why it was called crocodile in a fossil state. Why do you not? Ichthyosaur.
Ichthyosaur.
Kind of does look a little bit like crocodile. Not entirely, but like I get where they're coming from, you know? I get what they're coming from. Anyways. So I mean, consider the fact that eventually it sold for just over £45. I mean, they made £23 off that. That was a lot of money that they got for this. I mean, they certainly didn't make, as much as dude who sold it for 45 made, but it's a pretty decent price altogether. I don't have the conversion for what 45 pounds... Actually, I want to know. 45 pounds in 1811. Oh, that's bad. That's bad. I wish you would tell. Okay, 50 pounds. 5,000 pounds today. Translates about $6,000. So, I mean, that's
not bad money.
This is pretty good money. It's good money. This is why antiquarianism was so popular for so long.
See, but you can kind of do fossil selling in a more moral manner than antiquarianism. Sure, it sucks that we don't have access to all those the information from those bones for study. But
I don't know. I would make the argument that when people started digging up random shit and putting them together into skeletons to try to get a lot of money, And then you end up with these skeletons that 200 years later someone examines and realizes these are not even from the same animal or period. That's a pretty big damage to the fucking study of the field. Because that has happened multiple times now.
Okay, but that resulted in some of the funniest Pokemon in existence.
Fucking always with Pokemon with you. Alright, well, okay. So, her mother, Molly, initially was kind of in control of this fossil business after her father's death. But Molly, we don't actually know if she really participated in the collections. It seems to be mostly Mary and her brother. But Joseph, her brother's time, was increasingly at this period started to be less and less focused on fossils because he was apprenticed to an upholsterer, right? So at this point, Mary had kind of already assumed a sort of leading role in fossil collection and selling, right, within the family. And this was a big thing for them. And honestly, good for them. One of their biggest customers was a man named Lieutenant Colonel Thomas James Birch, who was very wealthy from Lincolnshire, and he bought several specimens from them. In 1820, he realized that the family was very poor, and because they had not made any major discoveries in 1820, they were having to start to sell furniture to pay for the rent. So he auctioned on their behalf the fossils that he had purchased from them for the benefit of the poor woman and her son and daughter, who found all of the fine things that were submitted. It raised about 40,000, like today dollars, 400 pounds at the time. And some of that was given to the family. We don't actually know how much. There's no records of it. It's highly doubtful he actually gave the whole 400. But he did give them enough to get them into it like a steadier financial footing for the year and going forward, right? Now, as Mary grew older, she continued to support herself personally by finding and selling fossils. She mostly worked with the invertebrate stuff like the ammonite and belemnite, the ones that were called like devil fingers and snake skins or snake stones, because they could be sold pretty reliably for a few shillings. The bigger stuff sold for more, like the ichthyosaur, but they were a lot harder to find, complete, a lot rarer. In 1823, there was actually an article written about her in the Bristol Mirror. It described her as a persevering female who has 4 years gone in search of fossil remains at every tide for miles under the cliffs, whose fallen masses are her immediate object, as they alone contain valuable relics of a former world. To her exertions, we owe nearly all of the fine specimens of ichthyosauri of the great collection. So Mary Anning was not an unknown woman in the field of fossil collection, and she was very well known within the geological and early paleontological community. In 1833, the risks she took were pretty starkly illustrated because she was almost killed by a landslide that buried her and her dog that year. She wrote to a friend in November of that year is that the death of her dog really upset her because she watched him die when the cliff fell on him, and she survived, but just barely. Her reputation would just keep growing, though, from here on. She found the first complete plesiosaurus in 1823. In 1828, she found the first British pterosaur, which was called a flying dragon by the British Museum when it was put on display. She also found a squaloraja fish in 1829. We talked before, she had a pretty limited education. She wasn't able to really do anything beyond church schooling, but she read as much scientific literature as she could obtain, and she often would hand copy papers borrowed from others so that she could have copies to keep and read. The paleontologist Christopher McGowan examined copies that she made of papers in the 1820s and noted that the copies that she made would also include extra pages where she made her own detailed illustrations of the specimens outside of the ones that were provided. She also was someone who practiced the art of dissection on fish and cuttlefish so that she could understand the anatomy of the fossils that she was studying, which was pretty impressive. A lot of people who met or knew her said that the most impressive thing about her was that she was insistent on keeping herself acquainted with science so that anytime she found something, she knew what she found. And she could make drawings and engravings and fix them together onto frames and understand the knowledge that she had and what she was giving to people. By the time she was 27, she had made enough money to purchase a little house with a storefront window for her shop, Anning's Fossil Depot. Her business was covered in the local paper because it was popular enough, and she had an ichthyosaur displayed in the glass windows. Geologists and fossil collectors from all over Europe and America visited her here in Lyme, and fossils purchased from her are found in the New York Lyceum of Natural History and in many other collections around the world, most of them published from her purchased from her by various collectors at the time, which is pretty fucking cool. Even the king's personal physician, Carl Gustav Carus, actually ended up visiting her shop because of the ichthyosaurus and other things that were displayed in her windows. And he said that when he saw the prices she had, he thought they were very reasonable. Like 15 pounds sterling for an ichthyosaur, like a 6-foot ichthyosaurus skeleton. He was like, that's a good price. I would pay that. He didn't, but he would. You know what I mean? We love a woman who knows her worth and knows what her work is worth. Because 15 pounds is a lot. That's not something that someone's shilling out who's poor. But she knows what she's appealing to. She's appealing to an academic and a collector's market full of very wealthy, educated people. Go get it, girl. So Karis at the time had actually taken her name and address into his pocketbook for future reference. And in 1839, she ended up writing to the Magazine of Natural History to question some claims made in an article because she had discovered something that made what was said in the article incorrect. So she actually wrote to his magazine to be like, hey, I have this, proof of existence of fossil sharks with straight and hooked teeth from years ago when I found them. So you're wrong. Which pretty fucking ballsy. Pretty fucking ballsy. That was, however, the only piece of scientific literature written by her that was published during her lifetime. Afterwards, other stuff was published, but that was one of the only times that she had academic work published during her lifetime. Unfortunately, she was considered an outsider to the scientific community on the basis of her being a woman at the time. In Britain, when she was alive, women could not vote, they could not hold public office, they could not attend university. The Geological Society of London did not accept women as members, and they were not allowed to attend meetings even as guests. At the time, the only options for her in terms of working were farm labor, domestic service, factories, and things like fossil collecting, which is what she did. Anning probably knew a lot more about fossils and geology than the vast majority of people who bought fossils from her, but it was always the men who bought from her, who published scientific descriptions, and didn't mention her name, right? Because why would they? She was just the woman they purchased it from. She became very resentful of this across the course of her lifetime, and she said that apparently she had a young woman who used to work with her who said that Mary Anning had once said to her that these men of learning have sucked her brains and made a great deal of publishing works of which she furnished the contents but got none of the advantages. And she considered herself to be pretty badly treated by the scientific community, and I can't find myself to disagree. I fully agree that I think this is I understand that this is history and women weren't allowed to do things, but that's a shitty way to be treated. And I too would be a very jaded individual if I was continuously, very influential in a community but not acknowledged in sort of official publications and scientific research, even for the work that I had done, right? Honestly, a lot of these issues were part of just a larger pattern of ignoring working class people in 19th century scientific literature. because it was pretty often that fossils and other things would be found by construction workers or road workers who would then sell it to a collector, and it would often be the collector who was credited with the finding of the specimen of scientific or historical interest.
How do? Where? Little shop? Whose shop? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I found it, obviously. Like, she had it in the window, she dug it up, but I found it. It's absolute bullshit. A lot of geologists actually visited with Anning to collect fossils and discuss anatomy, classification. She was friends with Henry de la Beche, and often went he went fossil hunting with her several times. And he was one of Britain's leading geologists, as well as a few of the lecturers from University of Oxford were seen fossil hunting with her, and such. Not that this really helped her standing in the academic community. Kind of almost using her like a tour guide and then not contributing or not attributing the fact that she took you on a fossil hunting mission to these cliffs, but like, this is her stomping ground. She knows what's here. She took you to the best places probably. And then you just didn't acknowledge that really significantly. She also assisted with Thomas Hawkins in collecting ichthyosaur fossils, but was very aware, according to her diaries, of the fact that Thomas Hawkins liked to enhance his fossils. He would add fake bones to make them seem more complete and then sell them without telling anyone and such. And I just think that's absolutely hilarious. Like that.
Look. British paleontology is wild. Some of the stuff they came up with was wild.
It's not as if American paleontology is any less wild.
Yeah, the British were ahead of us.
True, but not by much. It was absolutely wild. Alright. But yeah, so, the large majority of really well-known geologists and such did at one point or another during this period, right, visit or know of Mary Anning, right? Even an interesting connection here is a professor of geology at the University of Cambridge named Adam Sedgwick was a regular customer of Mary Anning. He was one of Charles Darwin's professors when he went to the University of Cambridge, which is pretty interesting. Now, by the 1830s, though, right, the British economy was not great. Think back to what was happening in 1830s in Britain. Not great. So there was a pretty reduced demand for fossils, and it was becoming less and less common to find really large completed fossils. So Mary Anning started to have some pretty significant financial problems. Now, her friend Henry de la Beche did assist her by commissioning George Scharf to make lithographic prints based on the prehistoric life in Dorset, which was based on the fossils that she found. He would then sell copies of this print to other geologists and wealthy friends, and then donated the proceedings to Anning. It's one of the first images that comes up when the idea of deep time becomes like widely circulated in Britain. Do you know what deep time is?
No.
So deep time is the concept of geological time, right? The concept that you can represent time that spans billions of years rather than decades or hundreds in an image, right? So beyond the scale of human experience, it's the actual temporal framework for the development of life and the formation of Earth itself. So deep time is geological time, spanning billions of years. And so this print that showed, right, like the Dorset coastline and the way that Dorset would have been when these things were in theory living is one of the first examples of sort of a representation of deep time, because you're looking at a place and a place you live, but literally hundreds of millions of years in the past, right? Like time on a scale that humans do not deal with typically. And really hadn't at this point, because remember, religion and the studies of history, people were not all out here being like, Earth is 14.6 billion years old,
Heresy.
Yeah. Not the, the church had a monopoly on saying that the world was created in 404 BC. There were certainly people who didn't believe that, but very few people were thinking, 14 billion years. It's putting a time to a concept is a little rough. However, in 1830, she did make another skeletal find of a new type of plesiosaur, which she managed to sell for around 200 pounds. She also switched churches. So she stopped going to her local congregational church, partially because of it just decline in attendance, and its original pastor, right, the popular one, who was also a fellow fossil collector, left to the U.S. to campaign against slavery. And his his replacement was not particularly...
Not nearly as progressive?
Yeah. Was not super a fan. Anning was actually pretty devoutly religious, but
it helps when your religion's not... should I stop there?
Yeah. So she switched churches, and was quite happy to do so, actively supporting her new church, and such. In 1835, she lost pretty much all of her life savings in a bad investment. Supposedly that it was a con man who swindled her, but she was kind of left no savings, very little income on a regular basis. 1835, not great for Britain financially. So, one of her friends persuaded the British Association for the Advancement of Science and the British government to give her an annuity, or a civil list pension, in return for her contributions to the science of geology. This meant that she got a £25 annual pension, right, which did represent financial security in some aspects, because it meant that she had a guaranteed income even below what she was making from fossil hunting, right? Which is honestly a pretty good accomplishment for a woman in...
Better than what was happening prior to that.
Exactly. And the fact that it comes from the Advancement of Science Association and the British government, it is a physical acknowledgement of her work and contributions to science in a way that just had never been done before.
Look, the fact that she got that while alive is that's awesome.
Yeah. Now, Mary Anning died at the age of 47 in 1847 from breast cancer. Because of her progressive illness the last few years of her life, she had not been able to work as a fossil collector, not really. People in the town that she lived in thought that the effects from the laudanum that she was taking for the pain were signs that she had a drinking problem, and it was not great for her reputation, right? The people were putting around rumors that she was just drunk, and that was why she wasn't actively going out and collecting fossils anymore. In 1846, the geological community discovered that she had been diagnosed with cancer, and the Geological Society, remember the one that did not accept women as members or even allow them as guests, raised money to help with her expenses at the time because of her cancer diagnosis. And she was made an honorary member on the council of the Dorset County Museum, which had been newly created. She was buried in the churchyard of the local parish church, and members of the geological community contributed a stained glass window in her memory, which was unveiled a few years later in 1850. This depicted the 6 corporal acts of mercy, and then the window reads, "This window is sacred to the memory of Mary Anning of this parish, who died, and is erected by the vicar and members of the Geological Society of London in commemoration for her usefulness in furthering the science of geology and also her benevolence of heart and integrity of life." Her friend Henry de la Beche, who was the president of the Geological Society, wrote a eulogy. It was the first eulogy given for a woman in this context, and this was an honor that was typically only accorded to a fellow of the society, which did not even accept women until 1904, over 50 years after her death. Articles were published about her life after her death. In 1865, Charles Dickens published an article about her death in the All Year Round magazine that he ran, probably written by Henry Stuart Fagan. But Henry Stuart Fagan, according to later historians who fact-checked his work, was not original, not reliable, and introduced problematic errors into the literature about Mary Anning. He plagiarized large parts of his article from an earlier account of Anning's life, which was written by a Dorset native, which emphasized the difficulties that she had overcome, and not some of her other accomplishments. Now, Mary Anning's major accomplishments were primarily in the study of ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and fossilized fish and pterosaurs. We covered those already. And then a lot of invertebrates and trace fossils. She found an ungodly amount of those things. Now, a lot of her discoveries would eventually go on to become large parts of the evidence that supported the ideas of mass extinction, especially those that advanced the ideas of George Cuvier from the 1790s, who had originally put forward the idea of extinction based on fossils of mammoths. Ironically, until the 1820s, a lot of scientifically literate people didn't believe in extinction because they said that new species did not just appear, so old species didn't just become extinct, because extinction implied that the things God created were imperfect. So anything weird that was found was explained away as still belonging to some animal living in some unexplored region of Earth.
Thanks, religion.
Yeah. And these were scientists, keep in mind, right? This is how strongly a hold religion had on sciences in the early years. So some of the fossils found by Mary Anning, like the plesiosaur, were so unlike other living creatures that they were some of the major evidence that supported the idea of extinction, which is massive, you know? Also provided support for the other controversial suggestion that Cuvier had, which was an age of reptiles, a time when reptiles, not mammals, were the dominant form of animal life on the planet.
It's kind of funny, though, because eventually didn't we kind of resettle to that, though it was birds?
Well, yeah. Well, not exactly, but it wasn't reptiles or birds as we recognize them today, essentially. But, I mean, keep in mind, this... All of these like things that are for Cuvier's ideas lead to people being more willing to look into ideas that were sort of against church doctrine, which leads to people being able to just explore science in a more open way. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a big part of like the discipline of geohistorical analysis of geology, and eventually all of these things that she contributed to would go on to become some of the founding principles of paleontology. These ideas of deep time, extinction, evolution, the study of coprolites, which was pioneered by Anning and Buckland. Coprolites are fossilized poop, helps us understand ancient ecosystems. And so her legacy really lives on, right? Like in the modern study of paleontology, in the modern study of geology, in the history of fossil remnants, in the history of science splitting itself from church, right? It's really impressive. On the 200th anniversary of her birth in 1999, an international meeting of paleontologists, collectors, historians, and all those interested in her life was actually held in Lyme Regis in her hometown, and in 2005, Anning at the Natural History Museum was added alongside people like Carl Linnaeus, Dorothea Bate, and William Smith as one of these scientists featured, right? And you I don't know if you remember Carl Linnaeus, but you should. We had talked a lot about him in high school biology, the classification systems.
No, I remember remarkably little about high school biology.
What, you don't remember kids playing chase on freeways get smashed?
No, I remember...
Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family...
I remember a jackass super senior standing behind my crippled high school biology teacher air humping.
Genus and species. I had one teacher and she was just like, you should think of like a little like phrase that you always remember the classification order. One year I had a student who thought of kids playing chase on freeways get smashed. I've never forgotten that, and that is how I remember the fucking thing. It's a pretty memorable phrase, you know? And if you know the vocabulary you need, it's just the first letter of each word. But yeah, she's been the focus of multiple writings about her after her death. She's been featured in stamps, on coins, in all sorts of stuff all over the world. There is a statue of her in Lyme Regis that was actually... So this is actually relatively recent. This was fun when I was looking this up. So an 11-year-old from Dorset started a campaign called Mary Anning Rocks in 2018, right? And the campaign was to remember Anning in Lyme Regis by crowdfunding a statue and learning about her. And so they began a crowdfunding campaign in 2018. It was put on hold during COVID, right? But by 2021, they had earned enough money to commission a sculptor. They got permission from the Dorset Council, and they placed a statue of her on the 21st of May, 2022, which was the 223rd anniversary of her death. This was just an 11-year-old girl from her hometown was like, Mary Anning rocks. We're gonna remember her. We're gonna learn about her. We're gonna create a statue. And now there's a statue of her that stands.
I think Mary Anning's a very bittersweet story. It's like she didn't get the recognition she needed very early on. Like, like towards the end of her life, like there's a lot of honors that were put on her that were not put on women at that time.
Yeah, but I think it's very much too little too late, I think, at the end, because through the 20s and most of the 30s, right, the 1820s and 1830s, she was just the woman that you bought fossils from. People didn't care that she knew all about the fossils, that she was, you know, her friends did. But, like, the general public didn't care so much other than, oh, that's the woman who finds the fossils. And so you don't mention the woman who finds the fossils in the papers, you know, like the scientific papers. You don't credit them in the historical research. And by the time that she was given some of the honors and credit she deserved, she was sick. She was struggling. I mean, yeah, the honors were given, but if the world was fair, she would have been given them much earlier in life, and they would have benefited her in the long run.
But she's a big part of why the world is more fair today.
Yeah, she really is, because the separation of like science and church and like the sort of development of all that stuff is really large.
Like the community that wasn't paying her any mind, as she was sick, kind of realized what they were losing.
Exactly. And they did give her a lot of credit and help towards the end. I can admire that, you know, to a certain extent, because you have to think these were men that were very set in their ways. Some of them may have been her friends, but it was unheard of for a woman to be in a scientific field if they were, you know, anything other than a wealthy woman who'd done a little bit of extra reading. I mean, women couldn't go to university. Did that stop Mary Anning? No. That's admirable. I kind of love her. She rocks. Mary Anning rocks. That little girl was right.
Like, her fossil accomplishments are incredible, but fossils are fossils. They'll get dug up eventually.
Yeah, you don't have to be smart to dig up a fossil.
Her contributions to women in academic fields, though,
is invaluable. Literally invaluable. Ooh, you know, fun facts. You know how she was instrumental in finding and studying the early studies of coprolites, right? So at the time when she found them, remember we talked about like other things being called things different, right? Like devil fingers and snake stones. So coprolites were called bezoars. Those would go on to be featured in Harry Potter, right? Because they were a bezor is the stone found in the stomach of a goat that cures all poisons if you swallow it. Just a little fun fact. Yeah.
So what you thinking class-wise?
I can see Castor quite easily. In my soul, I want it to be a berserker, because you know, like Pebbles and Bam Bam from the Flintstones. Mm-hmm. You know Pebbles and Bam, yeah. In my soul, that would be great. Personally, I think she deserves sainthood for what she had to go through for the majority of her life, but I know she's not going to be a saint. because that's or ruler, because that's different.
I could see an angle on that with the Miracle Child stuff.
Right, you could see it, but at the same time, I realized that's not a very common angle to go from.
No.
I'm thinking Castor. If there's nothing else weird included in her, I'm thinking Castor.
No.
Berserker?
Nope.
Damn. Rider?
Nope.
I'm out of ideas.
Lancer.
I would like to hear the reasoning, but I'm going to check her design first.
So the other thing is, she's actually a
Oh.
Learning with Manga servant.
That's adorable. Okay, so we do have. All right, let me.
Yeah, she's playable. She's
Okay,
playable.
okay. All right.
Look, it's her
Her
dog.
dog. You know what? I don't know who's her artist.
Rio.
Rio? Okay. That's the Learning with Manga artist?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, I can see the inspiration in the art. What I will say about her art is this is so fucking close to, like, just the reality, right? Like, this is very much just a representation of Mary Anning, the fossil hunter. Like, the woman. And I can really appreciate that. You know what I mean?
That's kind of the pattern with Rio's, like, the characters
Yeah.
Rio picks for Learning with Manga. They're not, like, these tied to mythology or these great literary or historical, like, heroes. They're these very, very important people in history that we'll probably look over when we're thinking of people who should be servants.
Yeah, but the art represents that, you know? Like, this
Yeah.
is a very down-to-earth representation of a servant, you know? And I mean, even coming over here, right? Ichthyosaurs and pterosaurs and, you know, the other fossils that she found. I was going to ask what those things on the sides of her head were, and then I realized that they're the fossils, the ones that you can buy very often.
And they
Yeah.
detach.
Yeah. And her dog and stuff. I really like it because of that, I think, you know? Like, it's just so down to earth, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It feels very respectful in a way. It's just like, this is a woman who had a career, and this is what she looks like and what she is, you know? It also helps, like, we do have representations of Mary Anning. Like, no photos or any, well, not any famous photos, but we have, like, representations of, like, what she looked like as a person. So it's like, you know. Yeah. Anyways. I do want to hear the reasoning for Lancer, though. Because I'm very curious.
Just like most Learning with Manga, until her inclusion to FGO proper, her identity was not revealed. It was revealed in an FGO event.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike the creation of Paul Bunyan, which, if you remember, was a special kind of process,
Yes.
Mary Anning appears to be a straightforward traditional servant, just originating in that clusterfuck of a manga.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, side tangent, is anyone still reading that? When was the last time y'all actually learned something from the Learning with Manga?
Oh.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Anyways, she has a very headstrong personality, and has a considerable habit of trying to take control of situations, especially those that are quickly spiraling.
Good for her. We love a woman who is down to earth.
FGO players will be most familiar with her from an incident where Paul Bunyan terrorized the American South for an amateur film production. Anning would end up being summoned by Super Bunyan, and due to a misunderstanding, Anning incorrectly believed that she was being forcibly cast as the villain, and was not having it, so decided to say, fuck it, and actually became a villain with the intent to send the entire American South back to the Jurassic period.
I mean, you know what? That's a completely reasonable crash out. I understand.
An FGO event later, and things got better. She and Super Bunyan do eventually make up. All's well that ends well, the film still bombed at the box office.
Oh, that's fair. It was an anime film.
Yeah. No, it was live action.
Still. Oh, that's even worse. Yeah,
We'll get into class in a second.
Yeah, okay. So I've got just a couple relationships. Who's that hottie? Is that King Arthur? No way. What a coincidence that I'm a subject from her home area. Is she going out with someone? Then I'll introduce myself a bit. Oh. We love a
The Rio manga are very forward about LGBTQ.
Yeah, but do we love a bi queen or do we love a lesbian queen?
Pretty sure lesbian.
Awesome. We love a lesbian queen. Aren't there a lot of ill-bred gals around here? They're scary. They suddenly grabbed me by the collar. I just stared at them a bit. Well, I mean, you know... There are lots of reptilian cutie pies. I want to fiddle with them into submission. I want to dig up their feel-good spots. You know what? I don't have a problem with that. You know, I bet that she, Kets, Kukulkan, and Tez would get along great. There's a literal
T-Rex woman somewhere in the Fate Grand Order servant list. You haven't met her yet.
Oh.
But
like, she and I bet she'd get along real great with Kukulkan and Kets, you know?
Probably.
Yeah.
Winged serpent.
When she learned about them a little bit more.
Wouldn't be surprised if they're part of that list.
Yeah. Yeah, reptilian-related servants. Plus, aren't they, you know, they've got the whole, like, dinosaur fossil thing, evolution, yada yada.
Yeah.
Yeah, it counts.
So, Mary Anning fights with a hammer and chisel as her primary weapons. Mm-hmm. She can also shoot bolts of lightning and bring fossils back to life as her familiars because of that miracle child.
Yep, miracle child.
Now, the reason she's a lancer is because she uses an ichthyosaur as a lance once in a while.
I could see that, actually. You know what? I would have almost bet on Rider, though, over Lancer, because she could have been riding the ichthyosaur. Peachy, no. He's wearing shorts. Do not maim Knick-Knack. You better watch out.
I know.
She's aiming for you.
Give her not enough space to jump up. And she's still going to try.
All right, so Charisma of the Sea Lily focuses on charming women. She did have a lot of female friends, you know? We talked about, like, the ones who wrote about her in their diaries and
Fate
such.
is not the first work adapting Mary Anning that posits lesbian.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of Gentleman Jack.
Like, this isn't necessarily historically backed up by any evidence. But...
Yeah. But do you know the story of Gentleman Jack?
No.
So there's a woman behind the term Gentleman Jack, right? She was very famous during the let's say sometime during the Victorian period, I think. Basically, she was very famous for having a lot of very close lady friends at the time, right? People called like Gentleman Jack, right? Even though she was a woman, because she would show up to like her female friends' marriages in like funeral attire, weeping, right, and have like private meetings with them and holidays, and for a long time people sort of like speculated, right, on her being like lesbian, but she had written thousands of pages of diaries in mathematical code, right? And when they finally cracked the code, it was not speculation, my friends. It was a very flamingly gay woman, and we loved this. There was a HBO TV show about her life, yeah, and a couple songs written about her. It reminds me a little bit of that, you know. Fossil Lady's great discovery. Love that. Business sense. Yeah, it makes sense. And, okay, so Duria Antiquor is, I believe that's the name of some of the first works about deep time and geological time that were written by her friend Henry de la Beche, I think, that she contributed for information to. Like, that is, I think, a specific reference to this work that she contributed to, like, very heavily, that factors into the creation of deep time in the scientific perception. Yeah. I also see it's her noble phantasm.
Yeah. So, with this noble phantasm, Mary calls lightning, which strikes the ground around her, raising the fossils in the area back to life. She then commands her legion of exotic life to attack her opponents. In theory, this should be usable as a reality marble, but her Saint Graph, as it is currently, is just a little too weak, because she is a 1-star servant FGO.
That's disappointing.
It's a special, like, limited, easy-to-get event servant, that's why. It's like
Can I get her?
Yeah, when she rolls around, she's on the friend point banner.
I'm very excited. I do want Mary Anning. That'll be fun.
She should have another one coming up soon, I think.
Okay, I'm on HD. Is she relatively new?
She came out a year or two ago in NA, so about 3 or 4 years ago.
But she is relatively new. I was gonna say, because her animations are pretty fancy. Oh, look, the plesiosaur. Hey, plesiosaur. Nessie. Sorry, you know the joke that, like,
Yeah.
Nessie's probably a plesiosaur that still exists. Yeah. Ooh, lightning. I kind of love just, like, jump on the person and hit them with a hammer, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then ride a plesiosaur to shoot lightning at them.
I want you to know that this event came out less than a year after the Da Vinci Summer came out, where Da Vinci was carrying around a Stegosaurus.
Yeah!
In less than a year before Nahui McLawn came out, where they had
Oh,
dinosaur
yeah,
people. Like, FGO, someone in that FGO office, probably Nasu, was watching a lot of Jurassic Park, I'm pretty sure.
To be fair, valid choice. I do love me some Jurassic Park. I watch it at least twice a year. Specifically, I personally have a tradition where I watch it every year on Thanksgiving while I'm peeling potatoes. Partially because some of the bits can still get me to, like, jump a little bit, and I peel potatoes with a very sharp knife, like, directly at my, like, heart, because I don't have a potato peeler, and it's not the way you should peel potatoes. So it's kind of an exercise in my own ability not to stab myself in the chest. Because I jumped real hard at one point, you know? Nick Nack has seen it.
Mm-hmm.
It's slightly nerve-wracking, according to most people watching. Ugh. What a team. I don't mind Da Vinci, but Edison is there. That just rubs me the wrong way, you know?
Pretty sure it's a support. Edison actually has a skill cooldown on him.
Oh, her dog! Her dog showed up! Oh my god. She does summon a bunch of... Oh my god, I love them. And it's like on an ocean floor, like the one...
The dog gets a little licking too.
I love it. I love it! I love it. I'm gonna be so disappointed by the amount of art, aren't I? So we've got the April Fools. And we've got the other April Fools. And we've got the baseball. And we've got the soccer. We love that. Okay. Alright. Aw, see? See? We have, like, no extra art.
I have plenty of art of her in her manga.
But I haven't read the manga. Knick Knack, buy the manga. Let me read it.
Buy it paperback.
Knick Knack.
It's all available in-app on FGO. You just click it, and then it takes you immediately to the webpage where all the chapters of the manga are stored.
I have to read that shit. Okay.
It's a trip.
Look at the fossils on the ichthyosaur skull and all sorts of stuff around. Also, the reference to the crystals is a little funny since I made that joke. Alright. Memories of the prehistoric world buried in the ground for ages. Mementos forgotten by time, reduced to mere objects. Some people call such clumps desire. Others use much more beautiful language to describe such things. What will you call it when you finally get your hands on it? Pretty fucking cool is what I'll call it. Alright. Craft Essence, EXP card, Daikokuten, and Anning.
You don't really know.
I don't know Daikokuten.
Yeah.
Birthplace! The sea took hold of me and never let go. As its waves washed over me, my heart wore down to a smooth nub. I could no longer feel anything. As the earth buried me, I died one tiny piece at a time. Eventually, nothing of me remained, and I was forgotten completely. Nobody needed me, so why couldn't I just run away? Well, that's horrifically depressing. Horrifically. Oh my god, they're made out of I want that so bad. I want a chocolate ichthyosaur skull. God, do you know how much I would pay for a chocolate ichthyosaur skull? This chocolate is modeled after the head of the ichthyosaur Mary Anning is said to have excavated during her life. You can feel Anning's playful attention to detail from its realistic yet adorably deformed shape. The finely detailed package is stylish as well, giving off an air of class one might expect from a luxury chocolatier. If you'd heard she'd made it all by hand, you might wonder whether she's in love, and you'd be mistaken to do so. It's pretty funny. But yeah, look at all the little... There's the shark tooth from the article she wrote about straight shark teeth and hook shark teeth not necessarily meaning... Other shark teeth not necessarily meaning two entirely different specimens. Pretty sure that's a fucking vertebra. And there's those fish that she found, and... Once again with Daikokuten. I don't know Daikokuten, but I recognize Daikokuten from the other images, so I'll
Yeah.
skip past. Because I'm sure we'll do Daikokuten.
Oh, eventually.
Yeah. And that was it! No! No! I really like Marianning.
I mean, I could tell you what chapter her first appearance in
77.
FG is.
I read it in the Wikia.
You want to quickly pull up that chapter? Feel free.
Oh, I don't have the link to the actual...
Just look up, learn even more of manga, and then it'll take you to an FGO page.
Here?
Yep.
77. Oh my god, she's so murderous. She's so murderous. Why? Okay, I can't keep reading.
Yeah.
I will keep this open though because I will continue reading later. Where do we normally end? We normally end over here. I was like, what page do I need to be on?
You know the best part about learning with manga?
What?
You could totally read that and it won't spill you for shit because they don't really... I guess the original regular servants they do, but they're so far behind. We've done most of the old servants at this point.
I'll probably read some of it on my own. But yeah, I really like Marianning. I want her. So I'll be excited to roll on the Friend Point banner when she's
I'll give you the heads up.
up on it.
Do you have a copy of it already? Because
Would you like to check?
Yeah, let me check for that for you real quickly. Because I remember she was you were playing while she was up, and I knew that you knew the historical figure, so I asked if you wanted me to go for her for you.
I don't recognize. Oh, it's doing the other glitch. My FGO today has just decided to choose violence. Oh wow. Please fix yourself. I don't know how to fix it.
You have to close the app. I don't know.
But I did that, and it took me back into it like this.
Do you have a rotation lock?
Yes, but it doesn't it's not on. Okay, I've set to auto rotate. See now the globe is just so y'all can see what's happening to my fucking FGO. Look, the particles are even going up. I mean, you can check like this.
Yeah, I can.
It's gonna work. Just a little weird.
Awful. Oh, Jesus.
Oh. Oh. Okay, let's try. Let's close that. And let's try it.
Is there an FGO update that needs to be done?
There was an update, but I thought I did it. Hold on. Let me search.
Because that's egregious.
Yeah, it's been doing this for like the last hour-ish.
If it keeps doing it, the next step's just to restart your phone to get that to work, which maybe we can do that later.
I don't want to restart my phone. I don't want to restart my phone. I don't want to restart my phone. Alright, guys. You have a hint for the next servant, Knick-Knack?
I'll go scraping under your barbecue, because the next servant, we're going back to ancient Greece.
Jesus fucking Christ. Alright. We'll see you next time.